Good morning and welcome into the show. It is Daniel Workman coming to you live from the Dreamagine Sports Studios. It is 9 a.m. on the East Coast. This is your 6 a.m. super early morning out west wake-up call and all time zones in between and around the world. Thanks for tuning in on this Thursday, June the 4th. The last couple of days, we've been talking on the show just about some of the societal and cultural issues facing America and facing the sport of soccer. And we've been talking through with different conversations with guests about either their personal experiences or with the opportunities that exist to make changes, to do things better, to improve the landscape of American soccer. That's something that I think is desperately needed. It is not proactively being handled, and it is something that I think we've got to have serious conversations about. Today on the show, coming up in just a few minutes after the break, we'll be talking to a high school soccer coach who has spent a considerable amount of time working at inner city high schools in the Deep South and introducing the sport to many players for the very first time at a high school age. That is part of this conversation that we don't talk about a lot, and I think it's an important part of this conversation. When we talk about access and we talk about getting kids the opportunity to play, it's always from the club soccer experience or the community soccer experience at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. We don't really ever have this conversation about kids who never get the opportunity to play the game at a young age and then find their way into high school, and their first introduction into the sport is at the high school level. Talking about the idea of jumping in the deep end and being forced to swim. That is it. So we're gonna get into that in just a few minutes. Sources told The Athletic that the MLS Players Association have approved a return to play proposal to send to the owners, and the MLS Players Association approved a plan last week for a potential return to play. And this plan has been sent to the league's owners. The vote does not finalize an agreement between the MLS Players Association and Major League Soccer, but according to The Athletic, it's a significant step toward the league coming back from its COVID-19 suspension with a summer tournament in Orlando. According to the plan, players would fly to Orlando on June 24th. Teams would train for 2 weeks, then play a 3-game group stage followed by knockout rounds. Teams that do not advance to the knockout stage would fly back home. The maximum time teams would be in Orlando is 6 weeks. One major sticking point does remain, however. In addition to details on a return-to-play plan, the union is also negotiating a pay cut with the league and modifications to the collective bargaining agreement that was decided on in February. As first reported by ESPN, the league asked the Players Association for a 1-year delay to a revenue sharing agreement that was a part of the latest CBA, which has yet to be ratified. And sources indicate the players are not willing to agree to that 1-year delay, and that may be the one final roadblock in the negotiation. So we'll see. We'll see what happens here. What I don't like in this is the the fact that you have Don Garber, who, because of the structure of Major League Soccer and the single entity and all the player contracts are owned by the league, Don Garber, is this kind of boss man. And basically he's gone public and saying, like, you have to be there. You better be there or else. We're not letting players stay home. You have to participate. There'd be very few exceptions to the rule. Otherwise, you got to be there. But if you've watched MLS for any length of time, that's not shocking. That's part of the business model. Part of this entire setup with Major League Soccer is to reduce, minimize, or flat out eliminate power going to the players. And we'll see. It's part of it's part of the entire conversation surrounding how we do the sport in this country on a macro level. It's not just an MLS problem. It's an American soccer problem. And it's definitely something that until we get opportunity and access into every community, until we can provide a pathway for every player, coach, scout, club, we're going to run into these issues unnecessarily. This also by The Athletic on Sunday night, Major League Soccer gave the MLS Players Association a Tuesday deadline to agree to its terms on an amended collective bargaining agreement and return to play plan. Otherwise, the league told players it would lock the players out. The threat comes after the MLS Players Association agreed at the league's insistence to insert a force majeure clause into the side's collective bargaining agreement. This clause are provisions that allow one or both parties to back out of agreed terms if circumstances arise that are beyond the party's control. This is similar to what the NBA has in place. And it basically says in extraordinary times, the league can kind of do a built-in cut on things across the board. It is obviously something that doesn't happen very often. This, pandemic thing is something that we've not seen this kind of interruption since World War II. So, even 9/11 was a very short-term, interruption. World War II was the only time where you had some extended interruptions like what we've seen with the pandemic. And so the NBA's approach with that clause, this is not something that's really been utilized very much. Now, I would be leery if I was the Players Association for a couple of reasons. I don't want to put in the power of a monopoly more power. Okay, so that's the first thing I'd be leery about. Secondly, looking at the landscape of society at the moment, we are much more likely to shut everything down again than the way we've been for the last few decades. Between the media, the public sentiments, people would be more trigger happy to say, let's all shelter in place. It's another pandemic. Let's don't go outside. Right? That, I think, is more likely to happen in the next few years than not. Not to say another pandemic's happening or not happening. I am not a medical expert. I'm talking about society. I think that we are at a place in society where we're more accepting of that. It may not be something that lasts for months and months and months, but let's say that there's a major outbreak of something and we have to stay home for 4 to 6 weeks, I think society would be like, oh, we don't want to do that, but okay, we'll do it again. I think that would be something that would be more likely than happening in the next 5 to 10 years than in the previous few decades. And therefore, if I'm the Players Association, that's another reason why I'm very skeptical and don't want to give that power back to the MLS owners, because that needs to be a financial piece that the owners are building into their projections. Not, hey, we didn't plan for that, we're going to take that money from the players. Players aren't the owners. The owners are the owners. The owners need to plan better. And so I would not want to be, if I was a Major League Soccer player, part of the Players Association, I would not be in favor of this. I would be trying to eliminate this from happening as much as I possibly could, and try to get away from giving them power unnecessarily, because at the end of the day, with our current system, there's not a lot of opportunity. There's not a lot of options. There are not a lot of options for players in America to play domestically. So I want to protect as much as I possibly can. And I think the unions really need to do something about that. Yesterday, kind of going through the Athletics timeline, yesterday, Jeff Carlisle on ESPN posted that the lockout was avoided and that the players and league ratify a bargaining agreement to 2025. And the approval of the proposal avoids a lockout that had been threatened by Major League Soccer and enables the league to soften the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic. In this, the approval now opens the door for the league to return to the field next month with a tournament in Orlando at the Wide World of Sports complex at Disney World. And so in this, a union source told ESPN that the total amount of economic concessions is over $100 million. It includes an across-the-board salary cut of 7.5% that isn't retroactive and is set to kick in for the May 31st payroll period. Players will have the option to delay the salary cut until after the Orlando tournament, but the total amount of the cut will be the same. Performance and individual bonuses will be capped at $5 million for this season. So, trying to find a way to make things work. The approved version allows either side to back out of the deal with 30 days notice if the CBA becomes economically unfeasible. MLS had been trying to have a force majeure clause tied to specific attendance numbers in case of a second wave of COVID-19. Now, why is that a big deal? That's a big deal because, as we've talked about recently on the show, Major League Soccer's done such a poor job. Don Garber, for all of the things that he wants to talk about in public, has done a very poor job in actually building Major League Soccer into a viable property that can stand on its own. The television numbers aren't there. The television revenues aren't there. The commercial dollars aren't there. So they are heavily reliant on revenues coming from people in the stands, coming to matches. That is different from around the world, and that is certainly different from American sports. And so he's been an abject failure in that department of actually diversifying and bringing in substantial revenue to Major League Soccer. And so he wanted to have the ability to, do the clause we were referencing a few minutes ago about the NBA type force majeure clause tied to attendance numbers, because that's the major metric that they want everything to kind of run by, because that's where their major revenue comes from. But the players succeeded in pushing back against that in the clause. A revenue sharing plan tied to a new broadcast rights deal set to begin in 2023 has also been modified. The original terms would have resulted in 25% of the broadcast rights fee. That was $100 million above 2022 levels being funneled into each team's salary budget. The two sides agreed to reduce the percentage in 2023 to 12.5%. The percentage would return to 25% in 2024. The salary bump spelled out in the CBA will now be delayed by a year so that 2020's terms will continue into 2021, and 2021's original terms will be moved to 2022, and so on until the end of the deal. This CBA now has been extended 1 year until January 31st of 2026. In all of this, one of the things that has become clear in Major League Soccer, I think, has missed a major opportunity in this. And that is, have the tournament, that's fine, but move the season to fall to spring and kick off. You're going to be able to recapture a lot of the losses in this new format, and you're going to set yourself up for a much better television deal, having signature playoffs and finals in May with very little TV competition. But, for some strange reason, Major League Soccer doesn't want the revenue. They don't want the money. I have heard that some of their broadcast partners have been calling Major League Soccer for 15 years, asking for a schedule change to fall to spring, and they refuse. The question is why? And really, I don't understand why American soccer has to be run so poorly. Coming up after the break, as I mentioned, we will be joined by a high school soccer coach with quite a few years of inner city soccer coaching experience, and look forward to having him on the show. And before we do, our sponsor this half hour is Ductic Brand, DUKTIG brand.com. You can learn more about Ductic Brand at ducticbrand.com and place an order. Use promo code DWSHOW. You'll get 10% off of the order today at ducticbrand.com. We'll be right back after this. back into the show. Thanks for tuning in today. As always, we appreciate it. We are joined today by Jeff Moody. He is a soccer coach, a high school soccer coach who's had extensive work in the inner city, and wanted to bring him on. Full disclosure, he is my brother-in-law, so be nice, everyone. Jeff, welcome into the show. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am doing well. This week, we've been looking at some of the cultural issues facing the country and really kind of talking about providing opportunity and access. How do we get more kids from diverse backgrounds involved in the sport and being proactive about that? And, you and I had recently talked about some of your experience working with players who were, first generation players, but not just first generation soccer players. They didn't even begin their playing career, some of them, until they reached your program in high school. And so we think in a lot of terms, in terms of bringing kids into the sport, a lot of those conversations surround travel soccer and city soccer at the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old age group. But there's not a lot of conversation about what do we do in communities where the game is not vibrant, where access isn't readily available, and where kids who are looking for something to do at first, and then eventually find that in the form of, say, a soccer program, fall in love with the sport, but don't actually get introduced to it until high school. That's not a conversation that's had very often, and I know you have a lot of experience in this, so I wanted to bring you on the show to kind of talk about it. When you and I first met, you were coaching at a high school with a lot of these players, and they weren't lack of athlete type of situations. These were very athletic players, very physically gifted players who just had a late start into the game, many of which were getting their first taste under your belt and your leadership. So when you first took that job in knew that you were kind of basically starting or restarting a program from scratch, and we're trying to find ways to build inroads to get these kids, at least interested, if not involved in the sport. What were some of the first kind of conversations and thoughts you had about getting the program started and providing some access to kids who, quite frankly, had never had any?
Well, the first thing, when I came to Viger, I was an offensive line coach on the football team. We were really lucky that year. We won the state championship football. So a lot of those football guys were like, "Hey, coach, we're going to come play soccer." And I was like, "Okay, come play soccer. Do you know any of the rules?" They're like, "Coach, we can't use our hands." All right, that's a great start. But so from that, I built the relationship with the kids through football. And then we moved into soccer season. And I had 16, 17 guys come try out. I didn't cut anybody. I didn't have the numbers to make cuts. And, what I knew I had to do for them is basically start. We started at just, fundamentals. I'd played some soccer in middle school, and, dribbling through cones, working on touch, explaining the rules of the game and how to play the game. And, honestly, we were in a practice scrimmage, and we've done so much work, and we're at an officials jamboree. So there's referees. We're playing another school. The ball goes out of bounds. And I realized to my horror, oh crap, I haven't gone over throw-ins. And, so that was the level where we were. And, kids were great athletes. Good kids. They wanted to be a part of something. They wanted to do something. We went out there and we played, And that first year, we won 2 games. We were able to beat our crosstown rival. They were a first-year program as well, another inner city program. And the rest of the time, we were pinging off of the Alabama High School Athletic Association mercy rule. If 10 goals after halftime, the game's over. So we lost a lot of games, 10-0, 11-1, 12-2. But the kids were persistent. The kids never gave up. And what I told them the whole time is I was like, guys, what you don't realize is you're playing against kids who have played since they were small. And here you are. I mean, I had seniors in high school that were playing soccer for the first time at the varsity level in an area that was pretty solid. I mean, we were 5A, and we were in an area with great programs, some of them state championships. And so that's kind of what we fell into there. And we had to do so much backfilling on the fundamentals and working, touch and how to receive a pass that, where other people are going through, the tactical progressions, we're still working on basically like U6, U7 stuff. And, credit to the guys, because they came out every day, they worked hard. So progress, we win 2 games that first year. The team we play, the team we beat twice, they fold. That school doesn't have a program anymore. So the next 2 years, we don't win a game. It's, the 10-0s, that stuff. Well, year 4 at Viger, I see some fruit. So all of a sudden, one of our goals is, in the beginning, it's, hey, let's not get mercy ruled. And that 4th year team, I had a bunch of young guys, freshmen and sophomores, and they really loved the game. They went all in, and we still didn't win any. We drew a few, but we didn't get any wins that first year. We come back the following year, so year 5, and those kids this is year 6. Those kids are now, they're a year older. We played summer soccer. We did workouts, and that year we won 3 and we drew 5. So it's getting better. The following year we win 2, and then that year I had a kid who never played soccer before. He made the all-state honorable mention team. He was in our state all-star game, and then he was able to sign a scholarship with an NAIA school in Mississippi. So that's kind of the Viger progression and the story. Now, as far as access goes, club soccer was probably not going to happen for any of those guys. Number one, most of them played second sport. They were football guys. Number 2, the cost involved in club soccer was going to be a major hurdle, and clubs will scholarship kids in, but these were developmental kids. So if I'm a DOC of a club, I mean, I understood why we weren't able to really get a lot of or any scholarships for those guys, just because the skill level was so low. They were getting better. They had a huge ceiling, But as far as, getting them right now, in a club, that wasn't going to work. So, we're playing against teams that have club kids. I don't have any club kids. Not, just several factors, like I just said.
So in those first kind of early years and really their kind of early years in sport as well, I mean, years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. What were some of their comments getting on the field? I remember some of them when I would attend some of your training sessions, your practices, just hearing some of their comments about themselves. It was almost like they were learning how to walk all over again. It's several of them, but it was all good spirited. They would rib each other, but it was certainly not from a place of trying to tear each other down. They were really kind of more laughing at themselves and at each other at the same time, in a way to kind of encourage them all to get better. What were some of those kind of early comments that you would overhear about them getting on the ball? And you might be used to running American football routes and catching a football or throwing a football, etc. But all of a sudden now they got a ball at their feet and they're trying to figure out how to make their feet work the right way. What were some of those comments that you ever heard? And as you kind of overheard those in the early stages, did they start to change as they got more time on the ball? Was there any of those comments of, man, I wish I would have started at a younger age? When I have kids, I definitely want to have them playing the sport. What were some of the things you heard from your players with your time at Viger?
Well, number one is, Coach, this is harder than it looks. Watching soccer on TV and what little exposure they had to watching the game, it looks easy until you have to do it. And then as they progressed and as they got better, we're making leaps and bounds of improvement, and we're working hard, but we're having to work hard to just be adequate. So it wasn't, we went from, crawling to walking, where everybody else is going from, jogging to sprinting. And it was, what we accomplished there was great. They're just, the results were a little different. As they got better, I remember one night we're playing somebody and we're losing like 6-0. And one of my guys was able to make one of their defenders, and you'd have thought we just won a game. Just being able to pull off a skill move. A kid made a cross turn. There was all kinds of, little stuff. And, what I had to do with them is I had to figure out a way to make it fun, because, with them not being soccer players, they were on the soccer team, but they didn't grow up in the game. When it stopped being fun, they were going to stop coming. So, everything we did was light, as far as the attitude. I didn't, I took what we did serious. I took the sessions we ran seriously, but it was very lighthearted. And they started to have fun. They enjoyed it. They started to watch the game. A lot of, like you said, Coach, I'd have done this when I was 6. Wish I'd have done this when I was little. Coach, you think, if we'd have played since Coach, do you think if we'd have played since we were little, we'd be good? That type of stuff. So, they definitely understood what they were up against, playing against those guys who had played their whole life and had an understanding of the game. But they never really got down on themselves. And I think what we'll see, I mean, those guys are turning 25, 26 now. So I think what'll come out of that is as they start to settle down and have families, when they have their kids, soccer's not going to be scary anymore because they've done it. So now, there's a rec league that is 7 miles from Viger. They'll put their kids in that rec league. They'll put their kids in one of the city leagues because they understand the game. It's not a foreign concept to them. And going forward, 10, 15, 20 years, I think that's going to be the biggest benefit to that program I had is, these guys have fallen in love with the game. Their kids are going to fall in love with the game. They may be soccer first guys, or their kids may be soccer first kids. So, we still have to work on some of the access issues and, make it more cost effective. But as far as the introduction to the game, I think that's what we did there.
In terms of the stigma in the community, you mentioned that it's not a scary sport. We kind of understand it now and really like the sport and want our kids to be introduced to it at a younger age than we got to experience. What was the stigma in that community beforehand? Was there any comments you heard about what they thought of the game before they got into it? Was it what was some of that?
I don't think there was a stigma, per se, as far as a negative or positive. I just think there wasn't much exposure to soccer, so it was just different. One of the comments I hear some was, now that we have a soccer team, maybe the football team can get a good kicker. So I think people kind of put our extra point things on me, even though I wasn't coaching football anymore, because we have a soccer team, so we should have a kicker. But it was just something new, something they hadn't done. As far as a negative stigma, I think it's always been kind of viewed as a suburban sport. And then I think it was kind of, until they played it, viewed as a soft sport. But then I think as they began to realize that soccer is a collision sport, that, that kind of went away. But, I think it was just, lack of exposure. And this is something you and I've talked about before, and not to hijack this, but, lots of people want to bring soccer to the inner city, but when they do, it's for like a weekend church camp, or one of the local colleges wants to run a camp for, the inner city kids, but it doesn't last. It's 3 days, 3 days a year, 3 days during the summer, a couple of hours. And, I think what we need everywhere, I'm not at Viger anymore, but, the community I'm in now, we're working towards this as well, is you have to be intentional, and it has to be, a sustained effort. It can't just be a one-off, a weekend. Hey, we'll put these pictures on Facebook. We did this for these kids. I mean, if it's going to be an investment, you have to invest in the community. You have to invest in the kids, and you have to be consistent. You have to play, the long game with it, and look at 7, 8, 9 years down the road. What is this? What are we gonna develop out of the long game? You're not going to go in and teach a kid to be I'm not going to use the word elite, but a club kid, a club level kid, in a season or in a semester or, in a week-long camp. So I think you can remove the stigma by being intentional and coming in and working in these communities and being consistent.
Yeah. So one of the other experiences you had with the inner city that I wanted to talk about real quick before we wrap up today is your next stop, which involved a different crowd of minorities, and these were kids that were not necessarily first introduced to the sport at the high school level. It was kids that were refugees coming from out of the country who had to escape terrible situations, and they land in in this country, and they're trying to find their way. Many of them financially in similar situations to your previous school, but had already had a love affair for the sport, but struggled from an opportunity and access standpoint. I would love to hear a little bit of your thoughts comparing the two situations and some of the lessons you learned from both in your time at both of those schools, with the kids coming from two different backgrounds and dealing with similar outcomes in terms of not having as much opportunity and access, even though they came from different backgrounds, different experiences with the sport, still struggled to some level with access. Talk a little bit about that in terms of getting your hands, rolling up your sleeves and getting involved hands-on with running another inner city school program that, instead of first generation players, now we're talking about refugees that are coming from the other side of the planet and getting involved in your school and getting involved in your program.
Okay, so I left Viger and went to Murphy High School in Mobile. Like you said, several refugees, not just from one part of the globe, but from all over. I had kids from the Congo, Rwanda, Tanzania, Afghanistan, Iraq. So, kids from all over. And these kids were, they grew up playing the game. So I go from having these novice players to having a program full of players, and some of those kids were scholarshiped in to the local club, and a few of them played for Zenzo in Love, who you've had before on the show. So they had some access to club. Now, what you had to do there, and the biggest takeaway that I've had in all of this, I've been an educator for 18 years, is kids are kids, and it doesn't matter if where they're from. All right, kids are kids. Kids want to be involved. They want to be part of something, and sometimes they don't have the outlet. Sometimes they don't have a way to facilitate that. But what I dealt with at my second stop was having to be an advocate for kids. ESL, English as a second language classes. Going and spending time in the ESL room, getting to know the ESL teacher, getting to know the ESL, that community, getting to know some people in the community, so that those kids, they knew how to play soccer. When I was at Viger, those kids trusted me, but they didn't know how to play the game. When I went to Murphy, those kids knew how to play the game. I had to get them to trust me. And, it took, we went like 14-6 that that first year, they got put out in the first round of the playoffs. A great season. I had more nationalities, but they weren't all refugees. And then, graduated. Two of them signed actually with the same college in Mississippi that my kid from the previous school had signed with. So, able to give them opportunities going forward. But the biggest thing there was building the trust and working with those kids, because it's a different. I've never coached club soccer. I've always coached school ball where I taught, so I can't speak as what it's like as a club coach. But I know that when you have when you coach club, the kids come to you for an hour and a half, twice a week, and then you see them on a Saturday. But that may be all the interaction you have with them. My wife and I were actually like helping kids pay for their physicals so they could play sports. My church helped us a lot to get kids cleats and socks and things like that. And that's not something I know some clubs they have that, but it was more like being an advocate and just working to just build the trust with those kids. And then two, being an immigrant, a refugee, some Latino kids. I had some Muslim kids. I kind of had to be the big brother because people would say snarky stuff to them, and then I would have to engage and take care of my kids. And I really think that was probably my biggest takeaway from Murphy was just building those relationships. My graduation just happened, and I was getting pictures from kids, sitting in their chairs. Thanks, coach. Thanks for all you did. And I don't work at Murphy anymore either, but getting them comfortable, getting them used to being in the United States, used to the way things work was fun. It was. There were some times where it was pretty stressful, but it worked out. And then, one of the things that you saw with us, and you were there for a lot of that, was those kids played a lot of pickup soccer. So it was a very fast, very, very physical, aggressive type of game, which was fun to coach. But we would train in the afternoons, and then if I went back by the city park, they would be out 9-10 o'clock still playing. So just being able to not I have a way I like to play. I like to keep the ball. I like to play physical. We want to take the game to you. Be the hammer, not the nail. And I think with those players, the soccer first players, the way I want them to play may not be the best way for them to play. And I think you have to be very careful that you don't take away a kid's individuality with something that me, as a guy who doesn't really play a lot of the game, I watch a lot of it and I understand it. But, when you can let a kid be creative, I think somebody on Twitter calls it flavor. When you let them have flavor, they enjoy it, and they keep coming back, to practice, and they give everything in their games because they know you're not going to yell at them or fuss at them for being, you let them have their pieces of their character that go forward in the game.
Yeah, and I think that's such a big key. It's you have to know the people you're having these coaching relationships with, knowing and understanding their background, and that's why I wanted to bring you on to kind of talk through some of the differences in these first generation players who are getting introduced to the sport at the high school level versus people that are new to the country, maybe not new to the sport, and having a different but yet similar experience. The last question I want to ask you and leave you with is this: how can we, as an American soccer culture, ecosystem, system, whatever term you want to use, how can we get better? What are some things that, from your experience and your background, what are some things we can do to provide more opportunities and access to the kids that you dealt with at Viger, as well as to the kids who are immigrants coming from other countries who are new to this country? What are some lessons you learned and some ideas that you might that either a club or a community or a high school might be able to tinker with or experiment with in terms of improving opportunity and access for some of these players?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you have to be intentional. And this is in those communities, it is a whole player, outlook. You can't. This isn't necessarily going to be somebody who shows up to practice and then goes home, and it's not going to work like a suburban the way it looks. So you may have to help mom buy some groceries. You may have to, take kids home. There's all kinds of things you have to do to build that trust. And then part of being intentional is it can't just be a one-off. If I would have judged the way we played soccer based on how we won and lost, just stopped after that first year. But the kids enjoyed it, and we got better. And it is a long, it's a process. It's a long game, but it's so worth it because you're opening up. Like I said, kids with opportunities for college soccer. One of my players from Viger, where I was first, he's a ER nurse now, and because he was able to get that scholarship to go play college soccer, that paid for his school, and now you've opened another, a whole another opportunity, a whole another avenue, without, just because you cared enough to give them something, a game to play. And you have to go in and you have to, if this is a house, all right, you have to you got to lay the slab first. And I know, a lot of folks think, they should be getting it by now, or this should be, they're wanting to put the windows in and the shutters, but you've got to spend some time laying those bricks and make it fun, make it where they want to come and get better, and then let them be who they are. If there's one of the guys that was my center midfielder at the first school, went on to a college in Ohio and played outside linebacker. He loved to play physical. All right. That was who he was. And he learned how to play physical and not foul. And if you don't let these guys, or this is any player, whether they're wherever they're from, you have to let these kids have their personality in their game. And I tell people a lot, well, why they'll ask me, a kid will do something. I had a 10 at Murphy that was an Iraqi kid, grew up playing futsal, was amazing with the ball at his feet. He had a license to mess up, because I'm not going to yell at him. I mean, he's one of the best midfielders around. If I start, going in on him, he's just going to put his head down. And then in a minute, when I need him to do some type of flip, turn, nutmeg, he's not going to want to do it. So, you have to let those kids, any player, find their personality, let their personality play out in the game, and just go from there. But again, I've said it 3 or 4 times. It can't be a one-off, and then it's a long road. It's a process. Results aren't going to come if you're trying to go in there and win immediately. It's not going to happen. But if you go in there and you invest in the kids and you put time in those kids, and then in 4 or 5 years, as they start to develop and they start to understand the way the game is played and how to play, and then they can start adding little pieces to their game. That would be something that would be fun to watch. A group of kids from those communities that grew up playing since they were, U6, and then at the high school level. But that's as far as the community. It's just, you have to be intentional, and it's you got to get your hands dirty. One of the clubs, and this is, I'll leave you with this because this is different, but one of the guys that coaches at another club in Mobile, he was a firefighter, and one of the kids that played on his team, he coached at a club that, it was Zenzo's club, was having trouble with he was having some trouble in school, and anyway, one day this guy goes in his full firefighter uniform and kind of goes to the kid's school, and buddies up to the kid, and all of a sudden everybody's hey, this kid's cool because the firefighter came to see him, and and that was a soccer coach. That's what I'm talking about with being intentional. You can't go into that community and not know the kids, and not know the parents, and not know the situations, and understand that you may have to stop at Little Caesars on the way home and buy him a pizza that he can take in and share with his brothers and sisters. I mean, and that's part of it. There's my wife is a social worker, and it was cool the way everything always kind of worked out, where we were able to not only meet just this simple athletic need for these kids, but also to meet a deeper need off the field. And so you just got to be intentional.
Well, I absolutely agree that unless it's a purpose, it's going to be something that comes and goes. But when you're living intentional, living on purpose, living on mission, and in whatever role that you have, whether it's a high school soccer coach or director of coaching, or maybe you're just a volunteer in the community that just loves the sport, that we can all make a difference if we are in fact intentional about what we're doing. Jeff, I appreciate you coming on the show, and I know with all the pandemic, you lost most of your first season at your new gig. But hopefully things get back and to at least as much of normal as we possibly can, and that you'll be able to get back on the field with your guys again in the very near future. I appreciate you coming on the show. Look forward to having you back on again soon, and all the best. Appreciate it.
I mean,
that is Jeff Moody, and we need guys like him who are willing to roll up their sleeves, do the dirty work, get involved. Chris Kessel was on the show yesterday, and he was talking about the same things, about getting in the community, doing things that they're not necessarily glamorous, but they are absolutely critical if we want to grow the sport and grow opportunity and access to the sport in this country. We'll be right back after this.
No one, no man, no woman, no child should ever have to drink green water with bugs, with algae, with disease in it. Bad water and a lack of toilets kills more people than all the wars in the world. We know how to bring clean drinking water right now to every single person on earth. And when you can bring water into communities, it truly transforms them. It changes everything. Or you could know that you'd made a difference. You could know that you had truly impacted the life of a family, of a community, of a region. There was either clean water or there wasn't. We believe in a world where every single person has clean and safe water to drink, and we will continue fighting until that happens.
Thanks for watching the show. Big thanks to Jeff Moody, my brother-in-law, for coming on the show today to talk about his experience coaching in inner city schools. We need more opportunity, more access. We're talking about this all week long. It's something we talk about regularly on the show, but this week especially, about building bridges, being more inclusive. And big thanks to Jeff for his work and being one of those guys who has been doing that over the years. Thanks for watching the show. As always, you can watch at danielworkman.com/watch. We'll see you again tomorrow.